Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we are diving into chapter 164 of Shangri-La Frontier. Araba just pulled off a massive finishing move to destroy the Chimera, but the real shock comes when a mysterious elemental spirit named Nereid pops out of his blade. From there, we get the lore drop of what spirits are, as Araba explains how they function in the game. Afterward, the team locks in for their main objective, heading to the nearest tower to take on a magic-canceling blocker. Make sure to follow through so you don't miss anything. Let's jump right into it. Araba executes a massive finishing attack, unleashing his Hieroblade's Coral Thorn technique straight into the enemy. The monster lets out a loud, piercing screech as the force of the strike tears through it, causing its body to violently shatter into digital fragments. As the pixelated remains of the creature dissipate into the air, Araba and Sunraku stick their landings on the ground. Both of them shout out in surprise and adrenaline as they look back at the massive explosion of data they just created. As the dust settles, a mysterious creature floating in swirling clouds appears right alongside Araba. Sunraku and his rabbit companion are absolutely blown away by what they just witnessed. The rabbit gushes over how quickly Araba managed to take down the Chimera, while Sunraku loses his mind over the hidden trick, completely shocked that Araba can summon entities directly from his blade. The display even triggers a wave of childhood-like excitement inside Sunraku. The rabbit confidently guesses that the creature is an elemental spirit. This catches Sunraku by surprise, making him wonder if such spirits actually exist within Shangri-La Frontier, especially since it is his very first time encountering one anywhere in the game. Emul enthusiastically explains the lore, noting that an elemental spirit forms when a concentration of elemental magic gathers together like a whirlwind and develops its own consciousness. When Sunraku questions if that is truly how they are defined in the game, Emul sheepishly admits that her father, the boss, was the one who explained it to her. Araba chimes in to confirm Emul is correct, adding that the spirit was only recently born and behaves like a young child. He then introduces her by name as Nereid. Nereid floats silently for a moment before suddenly turning around and sticking her tongue out directly at Sunraku. This leaves Sunraku deeply discouraged, lamenting that even spirits seem to despise him right off the bat, though Emul quickly reassures him that the spirit's behavior is probably just a reaction to his unusual appearance. Araba addresses Nereid, explaining that he managed to rescue her only because of the assistance provided by Sunraku and Emul. Nereid remains silent for a moment before leaning in closely to whisper a harsh truth to him. She points out that she would never have been swallowed up by the enemy if he hadn't dropped her in the first place. Araba groans in distress as she elaborates on how terrifying it was when they were ambushed by a school of Pescorians. Completely defeated by the guilt, Araba breaks into a sweat, offers an intense apology, and desperately vows that he will never let go of her again. Nereid peeks over at Sunraku and Emul, who are watching the entire interaction unfold. Sunraku is thoroughly surprised to find out that the newly born spirit can already speak, while Emul notes with amusement that Nereid is already nagging and lecturing Araba. Finally, Araba awkwardly steps forward to address Sunraku. Nereid bows gracefully and offers her gratitude to Sunraku for his assistance. Araba follows up by thanking Sunraku as well, expressing relief that both the spirit and his sword are finally safe. He mentions that Nereid can now repay the favor by serving as his personal weapon. Sunraku brushes off the thanks, reassuring Araba that it is no problem and acknowledging that Araba's efforts in distracting the dual-element orca were a major help to him. Looking at Nereid, Sunraku notes that despite her childlike appearance, this concentrated collection of magical force seems incredibly powerful. He assumes she must be exceptionally deadly in actual combat and that her presence played a role in the devastating finishing move they just witnessed. Araba immediately cuts in to correct him, stubbornly claiming that Sunraku is mistaken. He insists that the spirit had absolutely nothing to do with the attack and proudly boasts that the victory was achieved entirely through his own personal skill. This sudden defensive outburst leaves Sunraku utterly confused. Araba explains that what Sunraku actually witnessed was the elemental spirit that possessed his blade back when it was originally forged, referring to her as the Existence. Sunraku and Emul listen in silence before Sunraku carefully responds, noting that he understands she exists, but since he has never actually encountered a spirit before, he is still wrapping his head around it. Araba clarifies that he specifically means her classification as an existence. He sighs over having to explain the entire concept from scratch, reminding Sunraku of the rule they literally just discussed regarding how spirits are formed from concentrated pools of magic. Araba elaborates further, pointing out that spirits are essentially magic force itself and explicitly require that magic in order to physically manifest their bodies. Sunraku catches onto this explanation instantly and raises an important question, asking what exactly happens to a spirit when that internal magic force is completely depleted. This inquiry catches Araba by surprise. Araba answers the question by explaining that Nereid was born roughly 2 years ago, reiterating that newborn spirits lacking a strong sense of identity generally aren't very intelligent. He reveals the grim reality that if a spirit has no method of absorbing magic on its own, it will wander around throwing wild, mad tantrums until it can no longer sustain its own existence. Because of this, the vast majority of them do not survive for very long. He notes that Nereid was heading down that exact same path, having completely exhausted the inherent power she possessed at birth. Sunraku watches intently as Araba prepares to sheath his weapon, listening to the final piece of the explanation. Araba states that because she was running out of energy, she was deliberately implanted into his blade, the Grand Straight, which was specially crafted to serve as her protective vessel. By binding her to the weapon, Nereid is able to continuously survive by drawing off the small amount of magical force that Araba himself possesses. Araba concludes his thought, explaining that this parasitic relationship is exactly what allows Nereid to keep going and is precisely what he means when he calls her an existence. He turns to Sunraku to ask if everything finally makes sense. Sunraku attempts to summarize the information, asking for verification that the spirit simply emerges directly from the blade, which Araba loudly confirms. Sunraku digs deeper into the mechanics, guessing that the weapon must function either as a spiritual enchantment or perhaps a magic-casting sword. Araba quickly shuts that theory down. Sunraku then asks if having her around provides a boost to his attack power or other stats, but Araba flatly denies this as well. He admits that while it ultimately depends on the specific spirit, Nereid provides absolutely no such combat benefits for him, leaving Sunraku rather underwhelmed by the revelation. Sunraku processes the information with a look of pure disbelief, concluding that the spirit is essentially just crashing inside Araba's sword. He points out that given the dramatic timing of her appearance, he naturally assumed she was unleashing some kind of grand power for him, and he begs Araba to stop making the situation so unnecessarily complicated. Araba gets defensive, rejecting Sunraku's disappointment and snapping back that the weapon simply keeps her from vanishing into nothingness. Nereid floats nearby, looking incredibly touched and emotional as Araba firmly declares that her survival is more than enough for him. Sunraku sighs, admitting that he had higher expectations, which prompts a sharp retort from Araba. Emul watches the bickering quietly. Finally, Sunraku begins to understand the dynamic, realizing that Nereid wasn't forced into the blade against her will, but rather sought refuge there precisely because she had run out of magic. Sunraku notes that the relationship seems more like a mutual agreement where Araba offered her a hand. Sunraku then inquires if just anyone can execute this existence trick. Araba explains that it requires getting in tune with a vanishing spirit, obtaining its consent, and using the right weapon forged by dwarves who possess a specialized smithing skill. Sunraku and Emul realize they have never heard of any of this, with Sunraku resolving to check the game's FAQs later while assuming the Rabbituza smiths won't be able to pull it off. Araba catches Sunraku and Emul staring intently at Nereid and asks if they are really that curious about her. Sunraku looks away, wondering if the concept of an existence mirrors the story of Philia, and predicts that other players will inevitably try to stuff spirits into vessels to create weapons of mass destruction. Emul breaks the tension by nudging Sunraku, reminding him that he does not need another spirit since he already has her. Sunraku reflects that while Nereid isn't the kind of elemental spirit he initially pictured, Araba got his sword back, and their team is packed with way more power than before. Sunraku enthusiastically shifts focus to the day's main order of business, declaring it is time to go fight the 4 blockers. Emul cheers along as Sunraku states they will hit the nearest tower first, warning Araba not to lose track of them. Araba is left completely stunned by the sudden plan, questioning if Sunraku is serious. Nereid steps forward, encouraging Araba to go because the group saved them and she wants to help Sunraku as well. Araba concedes that Nereid makes a good point and dashes after Sunraku. As they run, Araba asks Sunraku if he knows exactly what kind of enemy they are dealing with in the area. He shares information obtained from his friends, revealing that the blockers inside the towers possess a special trait allowing them to completely cancel out all types of magic. Sanraku recalls catching a brief glimpse of one when he went up the tower earlier, while a horrified Emol panics at the realization that magic will be entirely useless against them. Araba mutters that he cannot blame Emol for being upset if magic is useless, while Nereid watches the group silently. Emol begins frantically hitting Sanraku on the head, demanding to know if he plans to leave her behind again. Sanraku reassures her that he is not, and surprises both Emol and Araba by offering to actively take her into the battle this time. Emol wonders if he would actually prefer the spirit instead, but Sanraku quickly dismisses the idea as they arrive at the base of the massive tower. Sanraku looks up at the towering structure surrounded by swimming fish, acknowledging that while people say magic simply does not work there, you never truly know until you see it yourself. He explains that he wants to scope out the situation with his own eyes. Araba watches from behind as Sanraku climbs the stone stairs, firmly believing that since Shangri-La Frontier is not just any ordinary game, a player always needs to be doubly sure of the mechanics. Upon entering, the group comes face to face with the floating entity guarding the area, identified textually as Blocker Cleothilla. Sanraku analyzes the creature, noting that compared to the gross-looking chimera they fought earlier, this blocker feels significantly more graceful and pretty. Emol points out that the enemy is floating silently in mid-air, but the calm atmosphere is shattered when the blocker suddenly opens its eyes, prompting an alert reaction from Sanraku. The blocker's elegant appearance rapidly changes as a mass of long, unsettling tentacles erupts from its lower body with a swift motion. The sudden, writhing display completely shatters Sanraku's initial impression of elegance. Both Sanraku and Emol recoil in absolute disgust, screaming out at the grotesque transformation unfolding right in front of them. Araba and Sanraku quickly leap into action, dodging out of the way as the tentacles smash into the ground. Sanraku immediately takes back his earlier comment about the creature being pretty, declaring that it is absolutely a monster. Emol draws her staff and tells everyone to get ready, while Nereid and Araba prepare their weapon. The group stands united, facing down the flailing tentacles as they begin their very first battle against a blocker. That is the end of the chapter, so make sure to tune in next time for chapter 165 to see how this fight unfolds. Let me know your theories in the comments, drop a like if you enjoyed the breakdown, and I'll see you in the next one.